I remember one patient who I cannot forget ever. Every morning he would touch his father's feet.
Yeah.
Okay. So on this particular day, he bent down to touch the father's feet. And you know what he did? He bit his father's great toe to the extent that he removed it. So
Wow.
the great toe was amputated by the bite.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Akhilesh Gandhi, and you're listening to the podcast of Humans of Feeling. This is a podcast about stories, myths, folklore, instances from the world of healthcare, doctors, and career in medicine. My guest today is one of the finest psychiatrists in central India. He's actually a person who truly justifies the definition of a healer. It gives me great honor to invite Dr. Sudhir Bhave. Welcome to the podcast of Humans of Healing.
Thanks a lot, Akhilesh. I am the professor and head of the Department of Psychiatry at NKP Salve Institute of Medical Sciences in Nagpur.
All right.
And I've been practicing both adult and child psychiatry.
So, Dr. Bhave, a very common saying goes by a doctor who treats mentally unstable patients himself becomes psychotic eventually. To say it more crudely, पागलों का डॉक्टर पागल बन जाता है. Can you please tell us how much truth is there to this saying?
Yeah, I'm happy you asked. The amount of truth in this is zero. I think people are at times biased towards psychiatrists. Now, when I look at my medical colleagues, I see cardiologists who have got their own psychological difficulties. I see gynecologists with psychological difficulties. I mean, psychological problems are something that can occur to anyone, any profession.
Yeah.
But when you know कि जब पागलों को ठीक करने वाला ही ऐसा behave कर रहा है, so that kind of sticks in your mind. What society sees as pagalpan and then associate a particular doctor interacting with the same kind of patient day in and day out.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think there is a minority of psychiatrists who take up the branch because they have their pre-existing psychological problems,
Yeah.
and they think that in psychiatry they will get an answer to that. Because psychiatry is a branch where you need to empathize with all kinds of undesirable behaviors,
Yeah.
abnormal behaviors.
Yeah. I've had people in my family who have had mental health issues, and the approach of my family and other Indian families as well happens to be that we'll first try the voodoo guy, we'll try the quack, we'll go and do some yagna or get some baba or yogi to get the patient looked at. And when all of these options are exhausted, only then as a last resort, when the patient has actually become even more debilitated, is he or she brought to the psychiatrist. Now, can you tell me why does this happen in the first place, and especially in a setting like India?
Yeah. I think the reason for that is a social cultural one. We have been brought up with the values, especially the rural India, that mental illnesses arise because of some kind of black magic done by someone. And for black magic, a doctor will not be able to help. You need to take the patient to a faith healer or some such religious person. And so it's entirely a cultural phenomenon. I think it's important to get rid of this because, as you rightly pointed out, many of these patients, in the absence of a proper treatment, they tend to worsen over time, and mental illnesses, they tend to get more difficult to treat the more number of years the patient is ill.
Yeah. In your vast career, I'm sure you have seen some of the most remarkable, unique set of patients. Can you just tell us any of the instances of one of your patients and how you went about treating them?
I remember one patient who I cannot forget ever. The history was that he was a very educated man. Okay. I think he was a professor somewhere, known as a very amicable and good person. And then he had this what we call as a psychotic breakdown. He developed schizophrenia. And the first symptom of the illness in his case was that he used to, like being a gentleman and a very nice person, every morning he would touch his father's feet.
Yeah.
Okay. So on this particular day, he bent down to touch the father's feet. Father, as usual, gave blessings. And you know what he did? he bit his father's great toe to the extent that he removed it. So, and then he started showing the true colors of the illness.
Yeah.
He became irritable, abusive, and this and that. And the family found it very difficult to get him to a doctor because naturally these patients do not agree. And he was this hatta fellow.
Yeah.
In his younger days, he had been a pahalwan.
Okay.
And in the course of the same illness, I have seen this happen. The only single time I have seen this happen is he bit off his 4 fingers. I mean, cut. 4 fingers amputated.
Wow.
Like that. So when he was brought to me, he was brought by the police. When police reached his house, there was a police sub-inspector. So he jumped on the police sub-inspector, throttled him. And he was so hefty that with great difficulty, the police people and the family, they could separate the two.
Yeah.
And brought to my chamber, again very violent. He was kicking the table and I could see the fingers missing. So I asked his father, what happened to the fingers? So he said, sir, usne kha li. And then the father showed me his great toe कि ये अंगूठा भी उसने खा लिया था. And now it's a miracle of treatment that in a very short while he recovered with treatment. So at some point in time he decided not to go for the treatment. मैं बिल्कुल ठीक हूँ, अभी मेरे को गरज नहीं है. And then he stopped coming. And then he again started developing some thoughts like people are after me. And Dr. Bhave is colluding with those people. I mean, they form a kind of community that's against me, something that we call as a pseudo community in the patient's mind. And then the next thing I know is that he started writing complaints about me to different agencies. Dr. Bhave is doing unethical practice, Dr. Bhave is not paying due taxes, and he sent to some newspaper something against me. Fortunately for me, the editor of the newspaper was known to me, so he discussed the case with me and I told him part of the facts. But then he was brought to me again and with her treatment he recovered.
Mental health issues amongst doctors are usually start off from the period of residency. What is it about doing residency in government medical colleges that pushes individuals towards the brink of developing these kind of disorders?
I think, and I have no doubt about this, that residency is some of the worst times in your life. I've seen residents go without sleep for 3-4 nights consecutively. Great amount of hard work, seniors not getting satisfied, no matter how much you put in, you being criticized very often by the seniors for some small lapses here or there. And I have known, like all doctors, of many residents committing suicide in their residency days. I think one thing that causes me great dismay is that we doctors are supposed to take care of mental health issues of the society. But very unfortunately, when it comes to our own colleagues, our own juniors, we care two hoots about it.
It's not just the fact that there are some folks who are sadistic. It is considered as a matter of pride and fashionable to say that my resident sleeps only 1 hour in a night. This is how I run my unit.
Exactly. That's very unfortunate. I have heard senior doctors say कि हमने अपने ज़माने में इतना काम नहीं किया है क्या? This is stupid. It's as stupid, as immature as saying कि मेरी ragging हुई थी ऐसे तेरी करूँगा.
Exactly.
Some kind of activism is needed here on the part of the doctors to kind of pressurize the government to employ more doctors at a junior level.
Dr. Bhave, one thing that annoys me the most is how popular media portrays psychiatrists. And can you please tell us how much of truth is present in this?
Yeah. The way psychiatrists are portrayed or electroconvulsive therapy or the so-called shock treatment is portrayed is it's very distorted. I remember a movie Khamoshi, an old-time movie with Rajesh Khanna, Wahida Rahman. A patient, mentally ill patient is being taken for ECT and he is being held by 4 or 5 people and he is shouting, मुझे माफ कर दो, अब मैं ऐसी गलती नहीं करूँगा, मुझे शॉक मत लगाओ. Movie.
Yeah.
And those lakhs of Indians who saw that would start perceiving ECT as a punishment. मुझे माफ कर दो, शॉक मत लगाओ. There was another movie called Gehrai. I had seen that long back. Parikshit Sahani, the character actor, he was a psychiatrist. So I'll describe the scene briefly to you that Sriram Lagu, the young patient's father and his son, they go to psychiatrist. And Parikshit Sahani, who's a psychiatrist, he goes near the window, looks out of the window, शून्य में कहते हैं ना, that way. Now we know that in movies, when anyone goes near the window and looks out, some big dialogue is going to come. And then in the movie he says, मुझे बहुत खेद के साथ कहना पड़ रहा है कि इसको शॉक देना पड़ेगा. वी नेवर से कि मुझे बहुत खेद के साथ कहना पड़ रहा है कि एंटीबायोटिक लेने पड़ेंगे या मुझे बहुत खेद है कि इनको बुखार की गोली खानी पड़ेगी.
Absolutely.
Why खेद on ECT? Now that's the unfortunate way the media portrays things. I mean, perhaps barring one or two movies like the one by Aparna Sen and some such good directors, I think it's perceived, it's portrayed very wrongly.
Okay, all right. So, Dr. Bhave, I want to ask you something about drugs, and I'm not talking about the pharmacological drugs over here. I'm talking about the so-called party substances. What are psychedelics, and why researchers in the West are rushing into psychedelics as a promise of some major therapy for various mental health disorders as such? Can you just tell us why is LSD, psilocybin, even marijuana for that matter in some ways, why are they being used in the West as a form of therapy?
Yeah. See, psychedelics are basically substances that alter the way you think and perceive. So, which means that they change the way you are thinking, your perception about the environment. They lead to altered perceptions, like you might start hallucinating, you might start seeing things that don't exist, you might start hearing things when nothing is being said, and so on. Some examples are MDMA, ecstasy, then as you said, psilocybin, LSD, ketamine, these kind of drugs. Now in the West, much research is going on into the medical use of these psychedelics or hallucinogens. Now this is not without reason, because many good clinical trials have shown promise of the use of these drugs in psychiatric conditions. Like, just to give you some examples, in PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, meth, as it's called, MDMA, that has been shown to be useful. Or psilocybin has been shown to be useful in depression. Ketamine has in fact entered mainstream medicine.
All right.
Our textbooks nowadays talk of, in fact, we are doing it. We are using ketamine in cases of severe depression. So, though these drugs have largely not entered the mainstream medicine, they are in an experimental phase. But I'm tempted to say that they do hold a promise. Because the tales of efficacy do not come from lay people, but they come from institutions where good research is being carried out. Now, how far will this research translate into clinical practice? And when something is researched, the outcome could be different from what happens when the drug comes in the market and then later phase surveys are done. But yeah, the promise is there. Today we are not sure how much would they be used later on by doctors. But yeah, I think that's a good area of research which needs to be carried.
I want to talk about sex. India has such a huge population, but are we having good sex? Do you see patients who come to you with issues of loss of libido, general unattractiveness probably towards partner? Can you just tell us about it?
Yeah. See, I would certainly say that we are having good sex. I think what differs is the cultural attitude towards sexuality, the attitudes towards discussing about sex, the attitude towards how the sex is being portrayed, and so on. And we have patients who very commonly come with sexual difficulties. In fact, there was one case I saw that also is a lesson in the changing morality and the role of doctors in that. It so happened one day, I think this was a few years back, that a young man came to me. And he came alone and he narrated to me his sexual difficulties, that, sir, I'm not able to perform, and those kind of things. Now, generally, when we are treating a patient with sexual problem, we prefer to talk to the couple.
Yeah.
Because, either of them can contribute to the problem or contribute to healing.
Yeah.
So I told him that, okay, I took the history, I said, fine. I said, I would also like to talk to your wife. So can you please get her next time? So he said, yeah, I will. So next time he comes with this lady, both sat in front of me, and beginning my conversation, I asked him that when did you get married? So he said, sir, we are not married. So I said, but you said you were married. So he said, sir, I am married, but not to her. I was flabbergasted. So now, without showing any signs of any undesirable expressions on my face, I said to him that I asked you to get your wife. So he said, doctor, it's like this, that I'm not having sex with my wife these days. It's only with her. So you please educate both of us on how to overcome my sexual difficulty. I think the Hippocratic oath came in the way.
Yeah.
And the Hippocratic oath that every doctor takes when he or she is supposed to pass out from the medical college is that I will help every single person who comes to me with some difficulty without consideration to anything else.
Yeah.
So here was a person who was indulging in an extramarital affair but had some difficulty. And at that point in time, I decided to keep my morality aside, my own personal morality. Because I think it's a well-known thing that in medicine, you don't look for the morality of things, but you look at the suffering and you try to alleviate that. So in this case, then I decided to go ahead with the treatment. So this man with his extramarital partner,
Yeah.
they were treated by me. With subsequent counseling, I later on learned that he started getting along well with the wife and both of them had a better sex life.
Oh, so the windfall effect of something.
Yeah.
Perfect. Dr. Bhave, we do a segment in our podcast about violence against doctors. I want to understand both sides of the story. So one is the next of kin, the bereaved relatives. What goes on inside their head before they initiate an act of this sort?
Firstly, they could genuinely misconstrue that the doctor was negligent and did not take due care.
Okay.
So if they perceive this way, then the anger is understandable.
Yeah.
Not desirable, but understandable.
Yeah.
Secondly, and a very unfortunate reason is that if a relative has not himself or herself taken adequate care of the patient at home, there is a guilt associated with the death. That happens at an unconscious level, not very conscious,
Yeah.
but there is a guilt associated, and the way to assuage that guilt, take care of that guilt, is to project it onto someone else. And that someone else happens to be, unfortunately, the doctor.
Yeah.
That, see, like the person is trying to tell himself, it's not me, it's a doctor who has erred. And doctors are generally soft targets. And thirdly, of course, is the clearly anti-social element, whereby the patient gathers some relatives or some hired people, hired gundas have been hired
Yeah.
for this kind of purpose. And commonly, the sole purpose here is to not pay the bill that is accrued.
Okay.
Like my patient died, the bill is 60,000 rupees. I don't want to pay 60,000 for someone who has died.
Exactly.
So let me create a ruckus. Let me come to a point where things become negotiable, and that doctor would either do away with the bill or he will significantly tone it down.
Yeah. Now, coming to the other side of things, where the doctor who gets through an experience of such sort of an assault, what happens to the psyche and mentality of that doctor? And how does that doctor bounce back and prepare themselves mentally better?
Any doctor who is subjected to violence, I think it's quite understandable that he's shaken, he's
Yeah.
traumatized. That entire experience can be very unnerving.
Yeah.
Because generally we are looked upon by the society as the savior, a father figure,
Yeah.
and whatnot, a noble person. But suddenly when you have 10 people barging into your chamber, maybe slapping you, hitting you, I think that's a kind of experience very traumatizing. And it does take a fair amount of time for the doctor to come out of it. And doctors become more cautious in dealing with the patients subsequently. One very unfortunate fallout of this kind of community's reaction is that the so-called defensive medicine is
Yeah.
spreading nowadays.
Yeah.
Defensive in the sense that I take clinical decisions that will safeguard me from future aggression.
Yeah.
Like I should not miss a diagnosis, because if I miss a brain tumor, the chance might be 1%. But if I miss it and if by chance the patient tends to have a brain tumor, then I'll be sued or I'll be assaulted for having missed that. So then ordering for more investigations and doing things that are rather inconvenient to the patient and the family, because I would say there is kind of no option.
Yeah.
Like you cannot practice textbook medicine, straight medicine,
Yeah.
and safeguard yourself from these kind
So
of
I guess the
influences.
incentives are a bit different over here. When you're trying to safeguard yourself, you're ordering much more number of barrage of investigations, which
Yeah.
otherwise, if you were going by a textbook manner, would not have.
Yeah.
And the cost of care increases just because the doctor is trying to ensure
Right.
that there is no base for which he would be taken blame for or
Yeah.
taken to.
Yeah.
All right, we have come to the fun segment of the episode. This is the rapid fire round. Shall we begin?
Sure, sure.
Perfect. If you were stuck on a deserted island with Baba Ramdev, what would you do?
I'll try to educate him about the virtues of modern medicine.
Nice. I love how polite you are about it. If given a choice, what is the specialization you would have chosen if you had the chance to go back in past and choose any?
Psychiatry.
Psychiatry?
Yeah.
Perfect. What is the one thing patients think they know very well, but in reality they are clueless or wrong about it?
Overconfidence about their own thinking style and their own behaviors.
What are the biggest mistakes you see parents make while upbringing their children to create mental health issues amongst them?
I think the single biggest mistake that is like an undercurrent for parental wrong behavior is lack of empathy. Inability at empathizing with the child so that they don't know what's going on in the child's mind and imposing their own thing.
Interesting. What is the worst comment you have heard from someone for becoming a psychiatrist, for being a psychiatrist?
My professor of medicine,
Yeah.
one day we were crossing in the medical college, a very reputed Dr. Chaube, Padma Shri, a very well-known man. So he knew me personally and he asked my friend कि इसको साइकेट्री में जाके कितने साल हो गए हैं. So my friend said, he calculated, said, सर 13 साल. ठीक है, अभी 2 साल तो प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, पर वो 15 साल के बाद गड़बड़ हो जाती है.
There are two opposite school of thoughts in psychology, Freudian and Jungian. Which school of thought do you align most yourself with?
I'm more Jungian.
You're more Jungian.
Carl Jung seems more down to earth, more relatable, less relying on sex to explain every human behavior.
Yeah. We come to a segment called as myth or fact. I'll tell you a statement. You can suggest to me whether it is a myth or a fact. Psychiatrists have the best work-life balance across all different medical specializations.
Fact.
Fact. Psychiatrists are constantly psychoanalyzing people in routine conversations.
Myth.
Myth. Most psychiatry medications make patient vegetative.
Myth.
Myth. COVID lockdowns will have a permanent effect on the mental health of the entire population.
Fact.
Fact. Pharmaceutical companies, especially when it comes to psychiatric medications, are doing more good for the patients than harm.
Fact.
Doctor couples don't have professional ego clashes.
I'm sorry.
Is it a myth or a fact?
Don't have. Fact.
What is the most memorable thank you or a gesture of gratitude that you have received from a patient or a relative?
I think one patient presented to me a big painting, and it was nice painting. The patient was a adolescent girl, and below that she had written, "But for you, I would not be alive today."
Oh, nice. Who, according to you, is the best child psychiatrist of India? Or one of the best? You can name a few if you want.
Some of those that I respect is from Dr. Shekhar Sheshadri from Nimhans, Dr. Shobha Srinath from Nimhans, Dr. Satish Girmaji from Nimhans, so mostly from Nimhans.
Nice. This has been the rapid fire round. Is there anything you want to tell our viewers?
So please watch this video. I'll be happy if you watch this in entirety. Post your comments about how you feel about it. And please subscribe to the channel that has so wonderfully captured the whole thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bhave.
Thanks a lot,
This has been
Akhilesh.
an absolute pleasure.
It was a great pleasure for me too.
Cheers.
Thank you so much. Thanks.